Gary Contessa, I want to welcome you to my production of Talking Horses. And we go back a long time. We're going to be talking today about the Travers Stakes, but we know each other from the 70s at New York racetracks. And you ended up working with a super trainer over the years, Pancho Martin, who is well known for training Sham. He started off, as you told me a little bit earlier, started off as a claimer, and Pancho worked his way up into making him a stakes horse and producing some others. So maybe in 2 seconds, you want to give me a 30-second update on what that experience was like. But today we're here to talk about the Travers, which seems to be an exciting race. And for our fans, I just want to let them know it's at 1.25 miles. It's on the dirt. It's a $1.25 million race, and it's one of the most prestigious races in race history. And it leads up to the Breeders' Cup, potentially the Classic for some of the best horses in the country. So Gary Contessa, welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're always so knowledgeable. Tell me a little bit, just briefly, because we're going to do another interview sometime about your experience with Pancho Martin. He was a classic, but what was it like walking on the track? And here we are talking years later, and I believe you've made somewhere in the neighborhood of $84 million with racehorses, won 2,400 races. Pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's been a good run. I don't know where I was when I won my 1,000th race, because one day Rick Lang calls me. He says, you're 2 wins away from 2,000. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Wow. I had no idea. And sure enough, those 2 wins to get to 2,000 were probably the hardest 2 wins ever in my life. And, I've spent most of my life since I left high school on a racetrack. And I was lucky enough to work for a king like Frank Martin. He was just such an amazing horseman. He was gruff, he was rough, he was tough, and that's the way they made people in those days. But he had a heart of gold, and he could look at a horse and tell you what was wrong with him from 50 yards away. And I love that about him, and he was just a great experience working for that man.
Well, I have to tell you, as a kid, I did work for a practice that did some work for him, and in my later years, in his much later years, I did a little bit of work for him, and I can confirm everything you said. In fact, some of the script of the Secretariat movie wasn't accurate because he was one of the most nice and gentle men I've ever met. Big voice, no doubt. And I think you sort of emulated that deep voice, because in your barn you were a lot like him. You were a drill sergeant.
Well, I thought that's the way you had to be. Frank Martin yelled at me for so many years, and I was part of him yelling at all these other people. I thought, you know what? I guess to be a great Hall of Fame trainer, you have to scream all day long, and that's how I picked that up. And I realized in my later years that you can be mellow and still make it in this business, which is kind of cool. But you're right. When the movie Secretariat came out, Frank was beside himself. He hated his depiction in that movie, and rightly so. He was a gentleman to everybody involved for that movie.
Okay, Gary, we're gonna keep going just for the audience's sake. You got cut out a little bit, but we'll keep going. I want to introduce the fact that 2016 was a great year for me personally. I got to see Arrogant win the Travers, probably the fastest time ever, 159.36. And also that year I had an interesting experience crossing with Steve Asmussen, who came into the Belmont Stakes with a horse with very long odds named Creator, who ended up winning. So we have some of these same elements shaping up. What kind of race is a Travers, and what do you shape up as being the race for this year, 2021?
It's always been considered the Midsummer Derby. It is a Derby type of race. I mean, you generally attract the best 3-year-olds, and the storylines on this year's Travers are just endless. You have Midnight Bourbon running for Asmussen, who you just mentioned, and Asmussen, and that horse almost had a catastrophic accident in the Haskell. So I mean, it was there's a lot of storylines here. You got the champ, Essential Quality, who in my eye, he won the Belmont Stakes, and in my eyes, he's one of the best horses in the country. And you have a lot of secondary horses that could jump up and win this race. This is the race to win. I remember when Jimmy Purcue, I was with Jimmy Purcue for a few years. We won the Travers with Willow Hour, and it was such a great honor to win the Travers. Just an amazing race.
I'm going to cut to the chase a little bit. Do you have a particular favorite? And I don't mean favorite horse that you like or trainer that you like, but the one Do you think it's Essential Quality's absolutely going to win it? I know right now the stats show that it's his race to lose, but what's your feelings on this?
I love the way Brad Cox has taken the reins with this horse, Essential Quality. He's done very little wrong. I'm friendly with him. I was talking to him. This horse is coming into the Travers unscathed. And one of the toughest things to do with a great horse is to point for a race 2 months in advance and have no problems getting there. There's always setbacks with horses. They're athletes, just like you're a quarterback on a football team. You lose your quarterback, you're in a big problem. But this horse has come into this race unscathed, and I think Essential Quality is the best 3-year-old in the country. And I think if he gets a trip, and a lot of things there's probably 100 ways to lose a race and only one way to win a race. And I think Essential Quality, if all of the stars align, I think he's going to win the Travers. I really like him in this race.
I don't want to delve off the subject too much. It's mostly about the Travers. But while we're on this with Essential Quality, the horse that came in second in the Belmont Stakes, Hot Rod Charlie, he interfered with Midnight Bourbon in the Monmouth in the Haskell. And I don't know that he's ducking the big guys in this race, but he's going for the Pennsylvania Derby. I may have the opportunity and honor to interview Doug O'Neill a little bit later, but just take like a minute and tell me what you think. Is he just preparing for the race he thinks he can win, which is a 1 1/8 race, the Pennsylvania Derby? Do you think that the horse needs a little more time? What do you think there's anything going on there, and what kind of horse is he compared to Essential Quality?
I think Hot Rod Charlie is a very nice horse in his own right. I think he's run some very good numbers, but I think trainers as a whole, trainers are trying to point horses for the races they think they can win. Some trainers are pointing for the Travers with very little chance to win, and they're looking for the glory of the upset in a spot like this. But I think if you want to keep a horse like Hot Rod Charlie, could be considered to be the second, third, fourth best 3-year-old in the country. And I think if you want to keep him at that level, the best thing you can do for a horse like that is to point for the Pennsylvania Derby. Why lock horns with Essential Quality and Midnight Bourbon when you can avoid Essential Quality and Midnight Bourbon and get a good payday and stay on your game? I always think of Burgess Meredith with Rocky when he kept setting him up with a bunch of bums before he had to meet Clover Lang. And it's true. You can give a horse, you can instill confidence in a horse just by keeping him winning. And I think that's probably the game plan for Doug O'Neill, is to keep Hot Rod Charlie winning. And I think it's a very smart idea. It's a great purse, and it's a race where he's not going to have to meet the likes of Essential Quality.
Okay, not to delve off too far into this subject, but there was a little bit of discussion that some of the interference that was attributed to Hot Rod Charlie and his jockey was based upon not being able to use a whip in New Jersey. A lot of people don't know that. It's sort of a new concept. Just very briefly, do you think that was a factor in it at all, or are you not really concerned about that?
I am vehemently opposed to that new policy. I think there should be whip rules, but maybe it's 3 strikes, 5 strikes, 6 strikes, whatever it is. But to not be able to use a whip on a 1,200-pound horse when you only weigh 100 pounds, I think is a mistake. In retrospect, watching the Haskell, I don't agree with that. I think it's a good excuse, but I don't agree with them saying that if he had a whip, it would have been any different. I think the jock caused that problem. But again, I'm not sitting on top of that horse. It could have been the horse, but to my eye, I thought the jock caused that problem in the stretch in the Haskell, and it had nothing to do with the whip.
Well, I'm with you mostly, and I would say I played a little polo in my life, and we had a line that we had to follow. There's an imaginary line. People don't realize that. Like, once you're on the track, there's an imaginary line there, and you can't go past it. And they don't realize that the crop is not to hurt the horse, but it's your steering wheel, because these horses have such little equipment on them to go the speed they go. But like you said, we don't have rear view mirrors when you're doing that at the speed these guys are going, and they make their best decision. If they think they're accelerating, they're past the horse, and maybe they judge a little too soon. Anyway, just moving on a little bit. What do you think about Steve Asmussen's chances? He's a second favorite with Midnight Bourbon.
personally, I think he would have won Haskell, or he would have been right there. I think that makes him along the lines of Hot Rod Charlie, maybe the second, maybe the third best 3-year-old. And again, if the stars don't align for Essential Quality, and there's a little bit of a kink in his armor, and I think Midnight Bourbon is the horse that can take advantage of that. I think Midnight Bourbon is a very, very good horse in his own right, but in the words of Muhammad Ali, you got to whoop the champ, and the champ is Essential Quality, and he hasn't shown that he's not the champ this year. He's come back with a vengeance, and he's been very, very good. So I think Essential Quality, again, is the best 3-year-old in the country, and Midnight Bourbon is one of those next 3 or 4 horses behind Essential Quality. And all it takes, you never go into a race fearing one horse, never, because all it takes is that horse to have a bad day, that horse to have a sore foot, that horse to, get in traffic problems. Anything could happen to change that. So I think Midnight Bourbon is the horse most likely to take advantage of anything that goes wrong with the trip or the day for Essential Quality.
Well, we discussed the 2 top horses that probably be battling down the wire to the wire. If it goes away, everyone predicts it'll go. Again, we always run short on these interview times, but the next 2 horses in line, and I'm not going to go through every horse, is Keep Me in Mind with trainer Robertino Diodoro. And the next is Dynamic One, Todd Pletcher, who's got the best rider in the country right now, or at least for the New York racing scene, Irad Ortiz. Tell me a little bit briefly about each of these 2, and we'll let the others 2, the other 2 we'll discuss just very briefly.
Keep Me in Mind is a Laoban who has shown, flashes of brilliance, but never seems to seal the deal. He has won a few races, but every time he's been in the major stage, he's usually second, third, fourth. And I think that's probably what's going to happen to him in the Travers. And you know what? Second, third, fourth money is not bad in the Travers. But again, if Midnight Bourbon and Essential Quality get trapped behind a wall of horses, and Keep Me in Mind is the guy that's in the clear, this could turn into a good spot for him, because he's not far behind the top guys. Dynamic Duo, same thing. Home field advantage. Todd Pletcher, who has a knack for bringing a horse into a big race on the top of his game. He doesn't have to leave his home stall. He's living in Saratoga. He doesn't have to leave his home to go to Saratoga. He's trained over that track. And Todd Pletcher is a master of having a horse peak at the right time. So I think the long shot, and it's not going to be very much of a long shot. It's going to be 5 or 6 to 1. The long shot of horse in this race could be Dynamic Duo, because Todd Pletcher has done this year after year after year. He's not in the Hall of Fame for nothing. He is a brilliant trainer, and Dynamic Duo is coming in on top of his game. The question is his top race good enough? It might fall a hair short, but it's not very far short. If he gets a little luck and Todd has him wound up like a top, like he usually does, that horse could win this race. Okay,
Gary, I'm going to do a disservice by asking you to be brief, because I think we're going to wrap this very soon. But give me a 2-second comment on Bob Baffert, who is bypassing with Medina Spirit, won the Derby, but got disqualified for some medication issues. And now he may be shooting for the Penn Derby, where he's going to meet up with Hot Rod Charlie.
Well, I think Medina Spirit is a legit horse. I think Baffert is, he's gotten so much bad press, and he's really a good guy, and he's been a great ambassador for the game. I think Baffert might be avoiding this race for good reason. You got a bunch of really good horses in here. I think if I was Baffert, I'd be heading to Pennsylvania too with Medina Spirit. I think he wants to get that horse back on track, wants to get him back in the winner's circle, and what better way than to pick a little lesser spot, get his confidence back, and go get him at the Breeders' Cup.
Okay, Gary, superb trainer, good friend. Thank you so much for this interview. I'm going to finish by saying what I say at every interview. I just wish a nice, clean race where no one gets hurt. Everyone gives it their best performance coming up at Travers. I thank you so much for your time and for your expertise.
My pleasure. Have a great day, man.